Now, we have a baby due any day. Lovely, yes, but what's the relevance to this video? So my girlfriend always talks about how growing up she would work on projects with her granddad, so stuff like miniature trains, building terrain, stuff like that, which is where this video ties in. It's something I'd love to share with my daughter. I think it's the perfect project to work with on a weekend and just see something you've made grown into this thing, just starting as like foam and paint and it all being put together and making this, I think, pretty good terrain by the end of it. So this is going to be my adventure into terrain making. I've done 2 or 3 pieces before, but it is going to be very much me learning as I go. Hopefully you guys want to take this journey and learn with me. It's something I want to get better at. So when I do eventually get the chance to with my daughter, it's something I'm pretty good at. So hopefully you guys come along for the ride. Even if you're just going to follow this video and that's it, we do end up with a kind of cool looking temple. I will point out stuff where if I did it again, I would change things. But let's get into the video and take a look at how I made this temple for my Middle Earth games, Star Wars Legion. It could really be used for anything. And maybe we might have some footage of it coming up in a battle report. Now, if you want to be involved in the battle reports, you can head over to our Patreon, where everyone in the Kingsguard tier has a character or dice assigned to them. And then depending on kills that character gets or sixes the dice's roll, they will then accrue points. Probably 3 to 6 months, I will pick out the top player and it will keep going like that. You'll just earn random goodies. Here, I'll flash them up on screen of some of the stuff we've got. I will be getting more. That is obviously optional and I appreciate you wanting to watch this video anyway. So let's get into some terrain making. So I started with this foam from a DIY store here in the UK. It was Wix. For this massive piece of foam, it was £10. It's really thick, so it's perfect for terrain making. You can cut into it, you can build it on top. It's really ideal. It's one of the only few places here I could find the foam, especially for a reasonable price in comparison to some other ones. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start by making the base. So we just want a part of this, which means I can use the other stuff for other videos in upcoming projects. So make sure you subscribe if you do want to see more of them. But basically, this is going to be the base. On top of it, we're going to have some rubble. We're going to have some stairs leading up to it and some rubble on either side. So I've decided to do it as the stairs separate just because it's going to be a lot more difficult to store. If I have the stairs sticking out, I can just take them off if not. So that's my decision making. I'm sticking with it. One thing you do need to note before you start this, make sure your blade is nice and sharp. So if you've got a Stanley knife like me, make sure you snap off that end. Make sure it's nice and sharp because it's going to be a lot easier to cut through, especially this thick of foam, with a sharper blade. If you're a younger member of the audience, make sure you, like I say, work with this with a parent, work with maybe an older cousin, somebody a bit older, more responsible for the sharper objects used in this. And as I say, I do think it is the perfect project to share with someone. So once you've got the main part, you're going to want to work on the stairs. So all I've done here is cut similar shape lengths on top of each other and just slowly reduce the size. If you're unsure on the size you want, just grab a miniature, see what feels natural. I think this is going to work fine. I would say always go too big rather than too small though. So just, even if it's absolutely huge, it could have been for giants or bigger creatures other than humans. So it could have been anything. It could have been like a tower that's collapsed. It could have been, yeah, the possibilities are endless. Honestly, as I get more into this, I would focus more on the story. So maybe I would have this block in the middle, like a statue's fallen down, and have the rubble of the statue. I am not to that level at the moment, so I'm starting out very simple. Just getting some fun stuff down, so see what we can do with it. Get it all paper mache'd up and painted. But the stairs aren't too difficult. Like I say, just reduce size as you go up and then allow for a step onto the platform as well. Make sure it's sort of aligned, and then you want to just chop away parts to make it look like it's been disheveled. So it's been a while, it's just sort of broken down and fallen apart. And you want to go around and do that on the other sides of the board as well. Just make sure it looks run down. Just chop away parts. You can't really go wrong here. Honestly, you want it to look as non-natural as possible, or as natural as possible. You don't want it to look like you've done it, basically. All I'm using here is some PVA glue. You can use super glue, you can use stronger glue if you want to. I think PVA is good. It's a little more flexible than super glue, and it's not going to melt any of the foam as well, more importantly. Once that's all stuck, you want to leave it for a while though. Don't work on it straight away. I've left this and I've come back to it the next day. This has taken me over 3-4 days. You don't need to leave that long, but I just wanted to make sure. It's also when I can actually get to it. Obviously, I work a full-time job as well. Got a family on the way, so really busy life at the moment, so it's just fitting this around it. So when I did come back to it, this is going to be where we start to paper mache. So you can just paint straight onto the foam. I've not tried it, so I'm not too sure of the results. I've seen people online do it and it looks fine. Paper mache just gives you a hard shell, so it's not going to break, it's not going to chip away. It's just going to make it last slightly longer, so I would always recommend doing this step. I would say every other project I've done so far, I've sort of cross-hatched, so I've done one layer and then done another layer on top the opposite direction. This is definitely the way I would suggest doing it, especially if you're using like this mod rock, which I am, like these bandages, because you can see the bandages if you don't do the crosshatch. In this video, obviously I've just done the single because I wanted to test it out, and it's given me so many headaches on painting and trying to cover it up afterwards. So definitely do, if you're using bandages, 2 lots. Make sure you do one direction then the other, just so it covers up all those holes. I was hoping the paint and sand would save me, but it wasn't quite enough. I've managed to cover it mostly, and I will get into how if you fall into the same traps. But I did want to explain that here. I didn't want you to see the video and be like, he's done it this way, I'll copy him. Yeah, it's just important, get down as many layers as you can. It's only going to make it stronger. There aren't really any drawbacks except time, which is one thing I didn't have, so that's why I've took that step. Now to make the paste, it's just simply water and some PVA. I think it's 3 parts water to 1 part PVA. Run the bandage through it, make sure you dry it out. You don't wring it out entirely, just make sure you get a lot of that liquid out and then slap it onto our project. You want to try and build around parts, so where you've got this big bulk in the middle, make sure you flatten it out on the edges. These rocks sticking out, make sure you try and flatten it out. You can use the scissors and cut it and sort of divide it up and move it around a bit. You just want to make sure it's covering as close to the project as possible, else you're going to get like these bubbles afterwards, which are never good. And again, in my haste, we did have to deal with that again at some point. But like I say, we will get into that as it comes up. Very simple step. Once that's done, again, we're just going to leave it. I thankfully had a really warm day, so I could pop it outside and just leave it. And it barely took any time at all, honestly. Once it is dry, we can start working on it. We can start painting on it. What I normally tend to do is mix a few colors. Again, unfortunately, I didn't really have the ideal colors. I wanted it a lot lighter gray, but I didn't really have these acrylics. And I wanted to get this done this week. So I've worked with a slightly darker temple, and I'm just going to bring that up with dry brushes and some paints afterwards. We've got mud, we've got grass, so we should be able to brighten it up quite easily. So I mix the paint with some sand and a bit of PVA so it all sticks together. And then I just plow that on. Make sure, try to cover up those holes if you can still see any, like I mentioned, from the bandages. You can just use newspaper if not, which is easier. It's not quite as strong, but it still does the job, and you don't have to worry about covering up markings afterwards. So you just want to get that everywhere, get your project absolutely covered, and then it's another day of waiting as we let that dry. Finally though, we come to my favorite part of the project, and that's dirtying it up. So we're going to go over with a few dry brushes first. I've got a grey colour just to bring out some of those parts sticking out, some of the highlights. And then I've got a white to really go over the top and get rid of some of this dark, dreary black. Once a dry brushing is all done, make sure you just really go over it, especially because I used a darker color here. I just want to almost wipe away some of that dark and just get some of these lighter colors on top. Once we're done with that though, we can start to work on grass and mud. Now, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of bandages showing for me. So I am going to use some of this AK Terrain mud just to cover it up. Once I've got the mud on top, once I've got the grass, once I've got some flowers perhaps, and anything else I can throw at it, it should start to cover that up. In a way it did help because I've been able to pick out random parts where I covered with mud. Otherwise it could look sort of man-made. So in a very weird way it has helped. So I've started to cover those up. It looks sort of natural. I've chosen this cliff edge to really go into, cover it in some wash, some paints, mud, grass, rocks, throwing everything at it, all of my terrain stuff I've got. This is all fairly common stuff. It's probably stuff you've got anyway if you're into modeling or miniatures. And then I'm just going to hit everything with a sprinkling of grass, and I'm going to let it set after hitting it with some scenic spray. You can make this stuff yourself. I think it is pretty much just like water and PVA, like slightly watered down PVA. I'm going to cover this thing, let it set, then take it outside, give it a good shake, and we should be finished. So here is the finished product. I don't know, I'm quite happy with that. I actually really like how it looks. I think it's going to be good for the tabletop. The sizes are perfect. I have got a battle report being filmed on it tomorrow. So fingers crossed that goes well. If you do want to see the battle report, you want to see any other miniature or terrain content, let me know in the comments below. Make sure you subscribe to catch the next episode. And if you've watched to this point, I really do appreciate it. I'm very excited about this series. And maybe it's something after making so many videos, trying to build up my skill, trying to get it to that point I want to have it when I have a daughter and when I can share this hobby with someone. Who knows, maybe one day we'll have that special guest to show you how we get on. As I say, thank you so much if you've watched to this point. That's all I've got for this episode. I will catch you in the next one.